Powerful insights often occur when you least expect them. On Transformative Leadership Conversations, they're at the heart of every episode. Hi, I'm your host, Juanita Silva, and together we're exploring a spectrum of leadership themes through the compelling stories and insights of seasoned leaders and prominent experts. In each episode, you'll walk away with inspiration, strategies, and tools to enhance your leadership, build effective teams, and lead thriving organizations. Welcome to this month's series on Transformative Leadership Conversations. And it's a series that we're calling The Confidence to Lead. So to me, confidence sort of feels like the word strategy, right? What exactly are we talking about here? What do we really mean when we say the word confidence? And will we know it when we see it? Because I think that oftentimes confidence is assumed to be kind of like a personality trait. Or maybe it's a muscle that some people have and some people don't. But confidence is something that we can develop. It's a skill we can learn. It's a set of practices we can build, strengthen. Maybe we lose at one time or another, and then we rebuild it again. Across the next 3 episodes this month, we're going to explore confidence from 3 different angles. First, today, you'll hear from Julie Silverman. She's an investment banking executive who has navigated confidence throughout her career in high-performance environments during the most demanding seasons of her work and her family life. Julie talks about confidence not as a straight line, but as a series of climbs, plateaus, and resets. Next is Angela Stopper. So she is the Chief Learning Officer and Director of People and Organization Development at UC Berkeley. So who else better to talk about confidence than someone who has built learning programs for thousands of leaders who teach and spent years studying the confidence gap. Angela has developed a competency-based model for building confidence in a way that's practical, authentic, and sustainable. She's going to share that practice and share that framework. She reframes confidence as something rooted in courage, resilience, and self-awareness, not comparison or perfection. And finally, I'll close the series with a solo episode, sharing my own perspectives and experiences on the confidence to lead. So let's get this series started. Today, I'm excited to welcome Julie Silverman, partner in the Strategic Advisory Group at PJT Partners, where Julie advises senior leaders in private equity firms. Before joining PJT in 2021, she spent 15 years at Goldman Sachs in investment banking leadership roles across M&A, equity, capital markets, and financing. She earned her MBA at Stanford Graduate School of Business, and fun fact, earlier in her career, managed the legendary New York restaurant Pastis, where she cut her teeth on creative problem solving, which you'll hear about in this episode. In our conversation, Julie offers a refreshingly grounded take on confidence. And it's not about having all the answers. We talk about building confidence across the arc of a career, leading through ambiguity in entrepreneurial environments, and practical ways women specifically can demonstrate confidence inside and out. And there's so much more. I can't wait for you to listen. Julie, I am so excited for you to be on the show. We worked together a while ago, but I've had you in mind to be on the podcast for a while because you are such an amazing executive, a woman in kind of a man's world. And that's kind of why I wanted to talk to you about this topic of confidence. Um, and of course, I thought of you not because you don't have confidence, but because you do. But you also have some really good perspectives on confidence in general, but also as it relates to women. So anyway, I kind of want to start because we throw around the word confidence a lot and talk about confidence and leadership. And it means different things to different people. And I'm kind of curious from your perspective, like what does like having confidence mean to you?
I guess, first of all, thank you for having me. It's great to be here. I appreciate you asking me. Um, and the definition is a belief in oneself. So being confident is just having a realistic sense of your capabilities and feeling secure in that knowledge. Um, and so I guess I think of it as the idea that you have the tools to be successful. Not that you already know the answers or already are perfect at something, but that you believe that you can get there. And I think that belief grows with time and grows with experience. And it's easier to be confident when you have more experience, but sometimes it can be easier when you're younger thinking, well, I don't have the experience, so I'm just going to go on what I know. And that can also be freeing in some ways. But I certainly think there's an arc of confidence over the course of a career.
Yeah, no, I love your definition, and it's really kind of freeing, that definition, because like you said, you don't have to have the answers, and it's sort of nice to feel like, okay, because getting the tools is like something that's really objective and concrete. Like, let me find the tools, right? What are those tools? Who can I talk to that knows how to do it, or has really good tools that I can adopt myself? And so I also feel like what you're saying with that definition is that you can build it. Like it's not like an inherent, you have confidence or you don't. Like you can build it.
Yes, it's not a destination.
Yes, yeah. So I kind of want to go off what you just said a second ago too, in terms of like the arc of your career, and I know we've had conversations about that before, and your confidence does adjust over time, right? And I know working with executives who especially take on new roles, there's this sort of like, oh, do I have imposter syndrome? Do I like am I why am I suddenly lacking some confidence? And it's like, no, this is normal. Right? You're taking on a new role that you haven't done before, back to tools, right? You have to like develop kind of a new skill set. I'm kind of curious, what have you noticed about yourself and maybe other people about the arc of your career and how confidence sort of evolves and changes?
Yes. So if you'll indulge me, I want to take you back 20 plus years to an anecdote that's going to sound not applicable, but I promise there's a point, which is in for 4 years, from 2000 to 2004, I worked at Pastis, which is the restaurant in the meatpacking district that was really renowned at the time as being like a celebrity hangout. It still exists, but it's slightly different form down the block. But at the time, it was one of the hottest restaurants in New York. And it meant celebrities were there all the time, like Martha Stewart for lunch and Julianne Moore for brunch with her kids and Malcolm Gladwell for breakfast, and we took care of them and we welcomed them and we wanted it to be that kind of a place. Um, and it got really, really busy. And my job as the manager was to control the floor the whole day. And so in December of 2002, smoking was banned in New York City restaurants, which meant that people were walking around and giving fines. And we were under very strict rules to really stop all smoking internally. And that was a massive shift. This was a real party place. We liked people to be able to do whatever they wanted. And it was really clear that we were subject to fines. So we had to be really strict about it. So we're at brunch days after this regulation goes into place. And one of the waiters pulls me over and says, "We've got a problem. Um, Courtney Love is on table 54 and she wants to smoke." And she went, and I don't know what to do. So I went to table 54 to Courtney Love, and I had to figure out how to handle it without Courtney feeling unwelcome or calling the owner of the restaurant and saying, "This is what happened," but also not getting a fine for smoking in the restaurant. And so I went over to Courtney and I invited her to chat outside the restaurant and take it out there. And we had kind of a one-on-one moment outside and turned what felt like a real challenge into something that was a creative solution to a problem at the time. And I think that is a little bit what I was saying is you can have confidence without experience, right? It's just thinking on your feet in the moment and coming up with creative solutions to problems. Um, and so I got Courtney outside and we hung out. She was also out there. So all these people saw her walking by, which increases the value of that shift at the restaurant. So there were a lot of positive things that came out of it. But at the time, that was how I knew how to solve problems. 20 years later, a lot of my problem solving is based in experience. It's based in drawing on what I've seen before and trying to pull together those experiences to figure out what the best recommendation is. But I do think creative solutions to problems is something that we are always striving for, in particular in this industry.
Yeah. First of all, I love that example. I never knew you worked at Petsy's. We went there for our anniversary like so long ago. So yes, familiar. But okay, I want to kind of unpack that example and that story. What a great story. What did you first say to her? Because that's almost the hardest part in any kind of creative problem solving when there's feels like there's an intractable issue is that first thing that you say or ask. I don't know if you remember the details, but like what did you say, how did you approach her? What did you say? And like what did you do to prepare for that? Like what happened in your head, to prepare for that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember exactly the words, but I remember the approach, which is I don't want her to feel like she's done something wrong and we're calling her out, or that um, I want her to feel like she's welcome and we're trying to find a way for her to continue to do what she wants without it being a problem for anybody else. And so it felt like not saying you can't smoke here, but rather saying, we love having you. We want to find a place for you to smoke here and still feel welcome. So why don't we do that together outside? I have a seat for you and we can make it work. And it's a lot in the approach. People have a quick first reaction. Are you here to help me or are you here to stop me?
Sure. Yeah, right, right. That's a great distinction, because ultimately the goal is to stop her, right, from smoking, right? Right? I mean, but you're right, and that's the creative part, right? But if you go just to, like, what you want the end result to be and be really, like, kind of rigid about it, you might not get all the other things that you want, which is for her to feel comfortable, for her to feel welcome, for her not to wanna leave. So that's a great example. And so, like, okay, so in 20 years later, when you think about leaning on your experience and all that, but I guess like what are sort of the dips and the things that have kind of gone along the way that have been that have helped you kind of build that confidence as you kind of develop as a leader, as you kind of become more senior. Are there other things besides experience that have kind of propelled that forward for you?
I mean, I think it's experience in the sense of putting myself in situations where I didn't have all the tools to succeed. And then looking back and realizing that accomplishing success in those situations is an achievement in and of itself, like being able to move through difficulty, move through uncertainty. So I left Pastis to go to business school. And I didn't think that at the time business schools would want to take somebody who had managed a restaurant. And I got in, I was thrilled. Going to Stanford was transformative for my life. But the first day of classes, they had our section in a room, and the dean came in and he said, okay, how many people in this room, raise your hand if you've managed 5 people? And many hands went up. And he said, okay, how about 10? How about 20, 30, 40, 50? And the hands went down progressively. And all that were left at the end were the folks that had been in the military and myself. And it was a moment for me to say, I may not have the skills that I thought were necessary for traditional business school, but here I bring something a little bit different from the rest of the group. I've managed a huge number of people and I've learned something from that. And so there's just moments of building confidence along the way where I still don't have the skills that all these folks have that they brought to business school. I still had to learn them, but I had something to offer. And I think each of those incremental steps builds to something bigger.
The thing that really strikes me as you're talking is that, and this is why I think your definition, it kind of goes back to your definition because when we don't have the confidence that we wish we had, we think there's a deficiency, right? But what we don't usually remember are the strengths that we already come to the table with. Even in your point with that example, those are strengths that you didn't even realize you had or didn't even realize, you know what I mean, that were there. And so I think that's really powerful. And I think for people listening right now, hopefully they take some encouragement from that, is to really kind of reflect on what are some areas of confidence that maybe I should have because I have something more than I realize.
Yeah. I think the other way I think about it is even if I feel like I have a little bit of a deficiency, like maybe I have a blind spot or I'm not thinking about this problem as vastly as I should, that it's okay to ask other people for their opinion and to bolster my approach. So now a lot of the times what I do before an important meeting, or if I'm a little bit unsure about how it's gonna land, I go to a couple of people who I trust and I run it by them first. And so I get the value of their input beforehand. It turns out people really love to be asked advice. They're happy to help. They feel useful. It doesn't make me look weak. I think I probably a long time would have thought it did, but it doesn't. Really appreciate it. And then I have the benefit of their questions and their input, and my then idea feels stronger in the moment.
Yes. I think that's really encouraging, and I think you're right. Many times we think we have to be solo confident people that are like superheroes that are, on a pedestal on our own. But you're right. I think asking for help, I think people really respect that and are eager to offer it. And there's so many benefits, to get their perspective. And I don't know if you found this to be true, but get their perspective both on generally their experience, but maybe even, you've gotten specific sort of advice or guidance about you. You know what I mean? Like, hey, I see you as, and maybe that was even unexpected. I don't know.
Yeah, it does happen. Where you realize people are seeing you as more of an authority than you may feel yourself to be?
We didn't use this word before when we've talked about, you know, working in a high growth company, right? That is, there's a lot going on. And I feel like with high growth companies, there tends to be a lot of ambiguity, which can be really, exciting because it allows you to be entrepreneurial. It allows you to do things maybe that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do in a company that's more structured, has a lot more history and culture kind of embedded, into it. And I know in your career you've moved from, more of a structured, high culture kind of highly grounded culture organization to organizations that are a little bit more open and figuring things out kind of as they go. Can you talk a little bit about ambiguity and dealing with ambiguity and confidence? Like where are those connections and, how have you navigated ambiguity? Because I kind of feel like ambiguity for many of us can cause us to not feel confident. So I don't know. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I definitely think this is, it feels like when you work in an ambiguous environment, there's like a confidence meter that's constantly going back and forth. You have moments and days where you feel better or worse. But yeah, I worked in one organization which was very structured. The expectations were very clear. And I moved here to PJT where it is much more entrepreneurial and therefore a little bit more ambiguous in terms of what's required of me every day. That's a little bit more on me to determine. And the interesting thing about we use the word entrepreneurial, which sounds incredibly positive, but that also means very independent and ambiguous. And you have to really chart your own path. And that can be hard. It can be hard um, every day, but it can also be hard over the course of a year. And I think that's what I've come to find is to have goals that both address those things. Some goals that
Yeah.
address the day or the week, and some goals that address the year. And so that way, if I have a year-long goal, I don't have to feel a lack of confidence about progress against that goal each day. I can take stock in it every few months and make sure that I'm still moving in the right direction. And I think the other thing, which we talk about a lot, my girls attend an all girls school, is the ability for girls to make mistakes and then bounce back. And I think an ambiguous work environment really forces that, which is I can go out to the whole partner group and say, we're moving in this direction. And then a year later, I may say, that direction wasn't entirely correct, wasn't entirely wrong, but we're going to pivot. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's not a failure. That's a modification of strategy to continue to move forward. And so that I think has taken a lot of confidence to be able to be willing to state publicly what I think we're chasing, even if I might have to come back and say it didn't work or it didn't work as I expected. Um, but to stake claim to something and to actually have the confidence to say, this is what I'm going to be chasing and this is where I'm spending time. I believe with the information I have in front of me right now, this is the right thing to do. And I'll learn from it as I continue to move forward. But there's still days where I may have that year-long strategic view, but in the actual day, did I make the right calls? Did I use my time in the way that was best? And like constantly trying to modify those little things to make sure I'm optimizing my time and my energy.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I really love that perspective because I think what you're saying is there's two big things that I'm taking away from what you've said. One is really thinking of the long view. So you're really thinking not like what, and it's almost like, I don't know, maybe this is a weird analogy, but when you think about companies, it's like that constant pressure of those like, monthly or quarterly, financial goals that you have to versus like the longevity of the company and where it's going and growing. And so that's kind of what you're talking about, but from an individual standpoint. So really having that long view in mind. But then the other thing that you were talking about is really allowing, yourself the I don't know if it's grace, but like, your ability to say, "Hey, it's okay if I'm gonna pivot. It's okay if, I'm gonna say, listen, that was okay, but now that I'm seeing things a little bit differently, and again, because of that long view, I think, really, right? I'm gonna say, we're gonna go in a different direction and feeling confident that, you're gonna make a move."
Yeah.
You talked about your girls, and, I know that we've had lots of conversations about women being in the, industry that you're in, um, how your observations, just anecdotal observations that you've had of being a woman, in this world, and then how confidence plays into that, like what you've kind of observed in terms of how men and women display confidence differently. Yeah, let's start with that. There's lots to unpack there, but yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot there. There's definitely a lot there. I have 2 girls that are teenagers, 13 and 15, really different people. Being a mom is a dream that I had. It was one of my absolute life goals, and so that is my number one identity. Um, and I think one of the things that I've really worked hard on as a working parent is, being really actively present wherever I am. And so this comes into play a lot when we talk about phone usage and how we manage our devices, which is I try to look at my phone one last time before I walk in the door at the end of the night and then put it away as soon as I get inside. So I'm really present when I'm there. And I read an article about this when my kids were really little, which is we tend to do both of those things at the same time. And we're better off really being in the playground with them when they're little and then really taking a moment to check your phone. And if I have to, I try to say, I'm checking my phone because I'm waiting on something important today, like as an exception, so they know I'm present with them. But then conversely, when I'm here, I'm really present here. And I think that's important. And so I I try to prioritize things with my kids that are important to me. And I try to tell people at work that's what I'm doing because I think given my position now as a more senior person in the organization, it's helpful for younger people to hear, "I'm leaving because I have something important for my kids." And sometimes I miss things for my kids, and I want them to know that that's also okay because I really like my job. It's not, um it's okay to sometimes put your job before other things if you want to, if you make that active decision. So I like for them to hear that I sometimes choose my job on purpose, and they can understand.
Yeah, I wanna jump in before you continue. So, uh, I just love everything that you said. That was really, really cool. I think the thing that really stands out to me is just intention. That's the word that I'm just thinking of is like you are so intentional and deliberate. And I think that really, first of all, I think that takes confidence in terms of being a mother and an executive, both, right? Because I think it's so easy, maybe especially for women, to sort of be thrown about in the wind of motherhood and work, right? So, just following the whims of everybody else in terms of like, oh, they need me, oh, they need me, and just sort of like, and it doesn't mean that you're not being responsive to other people's needs, right? But what you're saying is I have boundaries, and of course they have to be flexible, but I'm creating boundaries as much as I can. And that just seems so, I don't know, that really does really says something about your confidence in terms of, again, both being a mother and executive. And I think that's phenomenal.
Thank you. I mean, I would say an example of that is so I make my kids breakfast every morning during the week when I'm home. If I have a conflict, I can't. But if I generally that's our routine. I make them breakfast every morning and then I walk them to school. And I said they're 13 and 15. I will walk them to school until they tell me I can't anymore. Because that time in the morning is like setting the stage for the day. And you have this time, no distractions, no friends, no just to walk to school together and to hear what they're thinking about and just to listen. And I think it's such an incredible time of day and it sets my day right. So I really love it. It's very intentional, as you said. Um, yeah.
So, yeah, thank you. And I'm just so impressed that they're still letting you walk you to school. Walk you to school. That's great. It means that they want you to be there. I mean, because teenagers, if they don't want you to be there, they will let you know. So that says, I mean, that says a lot. It really does. Having teenagers myself. Okay, so let's go a level deeper, perhaps, as it relates to men and women in the workplace and confidence. What are your yeah? Because I know you've got some thoughts on that too.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think confidence is a tough word in the workplace. I actually had read there's an article in the Harvard Business Review about confidence being very gendered, that it's used by both men and women to explain why women have a slower progression at work. Like, oh, that woman isn't showing enough confidence for what we would expect at this level. Um, and it's rarely used for men in the same way. And so I think it's a tricky place. Um, find myself I have always found myself kind of moderating my public projection of confidence in a meeting to think about what's going to be palatable to this audience. And I'm not sure that's, helpful use of brain power, but
Can I jump in for a second and ask you a question? So, I think what's interesting about what you're saying is, and I don't know if this is what you were thinking, but, women, I think, okay, there's the confidence that you have inside, and then there's the confidence you demonstrate, right? And I'm gonna separate those for a minute, right? Because you could have all the confidence in the world inside, but then you're kind of thinking, how confident should I show up right now? Right. And if I'm too confident, I'm gonna get potentially, dinged. And if I'm not confident enough, I'm gonna get dinged. Is that kind of what you're thinking too?
yes, I think that's right. I think it feels like you have to thread a very narrow course on what's accepted at work for women in terms of how confident you come off. Um, and I think both men and women look on with some level of criticism about how women present themselves in meetings. Um, one topic that often comes up, it's a little bit of a tangent here, is for younger women. So how do younger women present, in the workplace? And this comes up a lot with regards to confidence. And some of this is advice I've gotten and some of it is what I've observed, but I do really encourage younger women to introduce themselves with first and last names and a strong handshake and to take a seat at the table, and I mean that literally at the table, not at the seats that are in the outside of the room, and to own your place in the discussion. And I think what women often do is take a back seat and don't recognize that they have value in being there. And it's hard to then at what point in your career do you then feel, "Oh, now I'm senior enough. Now I'm experienced enough to take a seat at the table." Just start doing it from the beginning, whatever it is. Like, just o own your space at the table
Yep.
and be a part of the conversation.
I love it. I almost feel like what you're saying is just make it a habit right off the bat, no matter how you're feeling, because that habit will carry you through. I love the name thing. So, I've definitely heard Strong handshake, yes. Take a seat at the table, 100%. The name. So first and last name. Any say more about that?
If you I go to a number of meetings that require introductions. My job is to cover private equity firms, so they are largely meetings with senior men, and if there are women in the room, they're generally speaking more junior. And the number of times women introduce themselves, younger women introduce themselves by just their first name as opposed to their full name, so you could identify them on the email later on to say thank you or to write back to them with a question afterwards, to look them up on the website and to see where they actually spend their time. Like, be a part of the conversation. There is benefit in really putting yourself out there and claiming your space in that conversation. And they're small benefits, but I think if you get into the habit of thinking, I'm not as valuable as the other people here in the room, I'm just my first name, it's not enough. And then there's never a time to say, I'm finally valuable enough to have a last name and to matter to this conversation.
That's really powerful. It really is. Yeah, I never thought about that. And like you said, especially for younger women who are maybe the junior folks in the room, but to just own it, and say, make sure people know who you are. I mean, that's really what you're saying. This is who I am, and that's really powerful. Yeah, I love that.
And I think the junior people in these organizations, they add something incredibly valuable. They know that, but it's for some reason perceived as slightly less valuable. It's like when you're junior, you're the engine of the machine. You're not driving the dialogue, which of course this job changes a lot over time and requires different skills at every level. Um, but one of those skills when you get older is the ability to interact with clients and to have good EQ and relationship building skills. So why not make that part of your early stage career where you begin to build those right away?
Well, and I think what you're saying too, depending on your role, and your seniority, even beyond like some of these younger, women that we're kind of talking about, there are so many times that we're called to really go to a meeting when we're meeting the CEO. And, I know that you do a lot of this in your job, but even other people who have an opportunity and it feels like, wow, I'm meeting the CEO, or wow, this is a big deal. Or even this person that I'm meeting, they're 20 years my senior and they have tons of experience and it can kind of be intimidating, and sort of demonstrate that you are a peer, right? And it doesn't mean that you have to be that doesn't have to be a negative. I don't know. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out how to say this, but it's almost like it almost doesn't matter what your role is when you show up as confident, and I can speak to you on the same level as anyone else, no matter what your role is. I think that's what you're talking about.
Yes, it is. I mean, I probably wouldn't say peer, but I would say you have equal reason to be in the room.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
You have reason to be in the room that is different than the CEO or than the head of your team, but you have reason to be in the room. And if you begin to diminish that value from the beginning of your career, how will you ever build up the confidence to say, I belong in this room? And part of becoming senior and being that person leading the team is you have to believe that you add value in that room and you have to start telling yourself that from the beginning.
That's right. Yeah, and I think that really is an important thing here is value, right? Is demonstrating your value in a way that because people are going to sense what they think your value is of yourself, right? And they're gonna take a cue from that. And so you have to kind of own the value that you bring and really feel like it is of value. And I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah.
So, any other advice that you'd give to women who are listening right now, younger or even more senior women, as people again are continuing to navigate careers and build confidence in different ways as they grow in their careers. So either way.
So one area that we didn't touch on yet is nonprofit boards. And I didn't when I was younger, I didn't spend as much time with nonprofit boards, but it's something I was really focused on. I really truly believe that I have a responsibility to give back to the community that I live in any way that I can, and that's with, both financially, but also with time and expertise and, just support organizations where I think they're, um, working to change the world for the better. So, I sit on a nonprofit board, and I sit on the board of my daughter's school, and one of the things that you think about is, this isn't my industry. I don't work in nonprofits. How can I add value as a board member? And I think a kind of element of confidence is recognizing that the skills you do have from one place can be translated to another one, and add an enormous amount of value in a way that you don't even expect. So, I'll give you one example, which is many years ago. Um, I helped to develop a feedback system for the executive director of our nonprofit board, and really wasn't one in place. And I took what I thought was a relatively basic kind of corporate 360 process and put it in place for the senior leadership and the board to be able to offer feedback to our executive director. And what our executive director at the time said was all of her peers were so jealous. They didn't have this kind of open dialogue or even ability to grow and the professional development that can come from getting really honest feedback from people you work with. And they really appreciate they would have appreciated it, and she really did too. And so, what felt to me like sort of a small um, project, it wasn't a ton of work, but it actually added a lot of value both to the person and to the organization. And I think that's just taking a step back and recognizing that we have value from our experiences and they can apply in other places.
I just and I think it does actually come full circle with what we were talking about before, right? Which is you have value that you don't always recognize. And that takes confidence to say, "Oh, maybe there's something here," like you said, that I haven't ever and in this situation, maybe you hadn't ever created that. But like you said, it was like not a big deal to you because you've been in the corporate space and that's just normal, right? That's just something that you do. So it's like, "Hey, let's just offer it here." But I think again, that value that you can bring, that brings exponential value that you wouldn't have expected. And having the confidence to say, I've got something to contribute there, that maybe I wouldn't have thought about before.
The only other piece of advice that I think about is sometimes confidence is shown through gratitude for other people. And so, as a kind of growing up in an organization, there are always opportunities to thank the people that did a lot of the work or that made a meeting happen. And doing that puts you in a position of leadership and also shows a lot of confidence. And it also obviously is endears you to the people that you have thanked publicly, but it's a really interesting opportunity. And it doesn't have to be the most senior person in an organization. Like, just one or two levels above, showing real gratitude for someone's work and efforts, um, it's a sign of confidence.
I don't think people think of that. People don't think of that connection between like offering gratitude and that being connected to confidence. Why don't you think so? Right? I mean, I really don't think so. I don't think people would have, yeah.
I mean, there's so many people that contribute to all of our success, and I actually think even gratitude to mentors. I'm fortunate to interact with a lot of incredibly highly talented people that come through banking for sometimes a short amount of time and then move on. And I have an unbelievable collection of thank you notes, and I save all of them because they really are meaningful to me. That it may have been one or two meetings, it may have been a couple of years, it may have been a big investment in writing their letter of recommendation to business school, it might have been just a coffee, but those thank you notes really mean a lot to me because the person is showing gratitude for my time, but it's also that I've been able to contribute to their growth. And so I do think gratitude and, I'm a big believer in the handwritten thank you note anyway, so it's not a surprise that I kept it, but it really does it builds other people, and I think it builds ourselves as well.
I mean, it's almost like in some ways, you giving other people confidence by saying thank you. It's like it goes both ways, right? What you're doing is you're creating like an atmosphere of confidence by exchanging that recognition of value is really what you're talking about, right? And saying thank you for that. Thank you for making a difference to me. or to this project or to that interaction or to that, deal or whatever. And in some ways what you're saying is you're recognizing again their value and their confidence, which I love.
Yeah.
Good. This has been so much fun. Julie, is there anything else that you want to say to people who are listening about confidence or anything else you want to add?
Well, what we didn't talk about is that I'm out at work, and the ability to be out at work, I think, allows me to be a genuine version of myself. And I would encourage people to be as much of a genuine version of themselves as they can, because it really it shows to the other people you work with, and you're able to develop deeper and better relationships, both with colleagues and with clients, and that does ultimately lead to success.
And when you say out, can you say what that so just so that everyone's clear?
So I am a lesbian and I've been out at work since I arrived on Wall Street after business school. And I think that's been really important to my ability to live um, a life that's both authentic, but that I show up as a genuine version of myself in the workplace. And everybody has pieces of themselves that they choose to bring into the workplace or not. And that's reasonable. But I think to the extent you can be as authentic a version of yourself, it helps to connect with people.
And I think it helps with your confidence because you're not necessarily trying to hide or compartmentalize in a way that is detrimental to like who you just are, the person that you are. And I think especially, I mean, especially in any role, but especially in your role, I feel like, you like your job is you showing up and you communicating with people and you representing the firm. And it would be very hard to be who you are and not feel comfortable in your own skin and feel like, oh, I haven't, people don't know exactly who I am. I don't know if you'd be able to do your job as well.
Yeah, it would be hard. I mean, the other benefit of it is you end up connecting with people that share some piece of yourself that you might not have known. I mean, I've had really powerful relationships with other out LGBT professionals over the years that have come about simply because we've been connected for that reason. Same with women, but for whatever it is, those relationships are really powerful.
Which and can we just say that I feel like the underlying theme here is that being vulnerable really takes confidence, but can also create confidence. Right? That's what you're saying is like your ability to be vulnerable, you got that takes some confidence to do that. But what that allows other people to do is feel like they can be vulnerable with you.
Yes, that's absolutely right.
Yeah, yeah, which can be very powerful, again, in any role, but maybe especially in the kind of role that you're in and other people are in, other executives, where it really is a people business, and those relationships are everything.
I made a really active decision to be what I call very out at work, which means to um, come out more frequently than would necessarily even be required, as opposed to using hidden pronouns when it would be more comfortable. Because I think when you get to a position of more seniority, you kind of have an obligation to help the people coming up behind you feel comfortable and to push aside any of the noise and let them know they wouldn't be the first person to come out in an organization. There already are people. They already can see very visibly out people being accepted and welcomed into an organization. I made that very active decision to do that. And I'm very glad I have, but it was partly for that. It shows a bit of vulnerability, but it's a little bit I felt like it was a little easier for me, and if it was a little easier for me, then hopefully I can make it easier for people coming behind me.
Yeah, no, you're really giving back, right, to the people that are in your firm and beyond, who might not have that confidence to be vulnerable like you have, but you're leading that example ahead, and I'm sure that's making people feel more comfortable that they can do the same.
I hope so.
Well, Julie, thank you so much for being on the show.
Yes, thank you for having me.
It meant a lot for you to be here and to share your stories. You've got some really great stories, and I'm really excited for people to to hear to learn from you.
That's great. It went so quickly, we could have talked for hours.
I know, it really did. Thank you for listening to this episode of Transformative Leadership Conversations. If you're ready to take your leadership to the next level or empower your teams for success, I am here to help. Reach out to me directly at winnie@winifred.org or check out my website at www.winniedasilva.com to learn more about my work in coaching executives, developing critical leadership skills, and working with clients to build effective teams. You can find me on Substack and LinkedIn, and now on YouTube. So whether you're engaging with me online, suggesting topics, or joining the conversation on social media, your voice is a vital part of this podcast. And you are always welcome to take a seat at the table where every conversation has the potential for transformative change.